Hello, this is Artemis_anime, and today I am reading Chapter 23, A Blast from the Past of Viridian by Silver Mist Anime Lover. Summary: Izuku finally figures out why he keeps hopping from one timeline to the other. A spur-of-the-moment patrol leads Izuku to someone he wasn't sure he'd ever see in this timeline. Aizawa Shota heaved a massive sigh as he sat down in a meeting room at UA. Not all of the teachers were present, but the core of the staff was. Nezu had sprung him, Hawks, and Viridian from the hospital in Hosu upon the time traveler's insistence, and the kid had locked himself in his private lab, courtesy of Powerloader, for 3 days straight thereafter. Only Recovery Girl had been able to see him. Viridian had called this meeting, not Nezu. If he was being honest, he wasn't sure what he expected from this gathering, but he knew it wasn't going to be anything nice. He had no illusions that it also addressed the thing that haunted Shota's nightmare: the White Nomu. The creature that Viridian had barely managed to bring down in Hosu. He'd heard his friends talk about different kinds of Nomu before. He'd seen the scars, both mental and physical, but nothing could have prepared him for the utter terror that monster had inflicted upon him. He'd never seen a living creature move so fast. He'd never felt so helpless before. Staring at the gaping maw of the salivating nightmare swathed in pale white scales had him feeling hot and cold from head to toe. It was primal terror. His every instinct had warned him that this is an apex predator. He'd known it without a doubt that he was nothing more than a prey before it. And yet, Viridian had managed to bring it down. That fight had been a far cry from his usual graceful movements. It was a raw struggle of predator against prey. There was nothing refined about the gnashing teeth and whipping tails and the flurry of blades and kicks. But they'd survived it. Thanks to Viridian and his prior experience, they'd lived. His thoughts were pulled back to the present when he saw Vlad and Namaji walk in, both looking concerned and somewhat confused. The news of the White Nomu had been kept as quiet as possible. Only Nezu and those who had fought against it were aware of it, but Aizawa was still wrapped in bandages, though thankfully it wasn't nearly bad as the USJ's injuries had been. Perhaps that was why everyone did a double take when they saw Viridian walk in, out of uniform, also sporting a fair number of bandages. His eyes roamed the room, carrying a sharpness they hadn't been there before. "Masa? Kenji? Thank you for coming," he greeted the detective and the police chief. "Well, you did ask for us," Sugamine nodded. "Though, I'll admit, I wish you had Tsukuuchi inform me of the situation a bit sooner." So he'd finally been let in on the time travel business. "I wanted to make sure the paperwork was in place first," Viridian shook his head. "Better safe than sorry." "Just be honest, you forgot," Tsukuuchi shot him, earning a light chuckle from the kid. "I mean, I did have a lot on my mind," he shrugged. "Are you okay, Asuko? I heard you got hurt pretty badly." 13's brows furrowed in concern as they took in their seat beside the ectoplasm. Nobody was in uniform today, it seemed. Even Hawks walked in casual clothes, one wing held in an awkward brace. "Didn't Recovery Girl treat that?" Shota frowned. "Yeah, but she could only heal so much at once," the winged hero shrugged with a small wince. "I'll have to keep it like this for another day or two before I'm cleared to fly again." He seemed rather put out by that. "Now that everyone's here, let's get this meeting started, shall we?" Nezu popped up from nowhere and called the room to order. Shota took note of who was there. Hisashi himself, Namuri 13, Ectoplasm, Powerloader, Snipe, All Might, and Vlad King were there from the UA staff. Sugamine and Tsukuuchi were there from the police force, and Viridian and Hawks were the outliers. "Midoriya, you called this meeting?" "Yes." He set down a large stack of papers on the table. "For those of you who haven't heard, there's been a concerning development. 4 days ago in Hosu, there was an attack. While we expected the stain incident and had prepared as best we could, something new happened as well. A white Nomu from the first run appeared." Gasps echoed softly in the silence of the meeting room. I thought you said the portal was destroyed, Tsukuchi's eyes narrowed. It was, the time traveler responded, with a light scowl, hand going for the luminous scar on his inner wrist. But apparently Shigaraki made a new one. He flipped through his notes. This in mind, we should expect to see more first run Nomu. More of that? Snipe shuddered, hard. Shota understood completely his fear. He never wanted to see another one of those again. It's very possible. Viridian ran a hand through his hair with a heavy sigh. I'd like to propose some specialized training for all of you. I have experience fighting these things, and while I'm not as agile or fast as I was in the first run, I can still give you all a better chance of surviving against these Nomu. So, you're offering to train us to fight these Nomu? Ectoplasm hummed. No. I'm offering to train you to survive, Viridian corrected him. You don't train to fight a Nomu. He snorted like the very idea was ridiculous. After having seen one, Shota had to agree. That wasn't a creature you fight. It was a creature you do your damnedest to survive against and pray you live to see the next sunrise. I'm afraid I don't quite see the difference, Nemuri frowned. You'll understand when you see one, Hawk stated, darkly. You said he made another portal. Nezu's tails flickered around sharply as he brought the conversation back around. But you swore Project Hope's notes were here. They are, Viridian nodded, placing his hand on one of his stacks of paper. The hand-bound, very old, and rather stained stack that looked ready to fall apart at the slightest provocation. But apparently he had a quirk that either let him remember or understand something he looked at a glance. He called the Project Hope portal flawed. You saw him? All Might leaned forward with a deep frown. Here? No, in the first run. His words sent a ripple of confusion through the room. Viridian let out a frustrated sound as he scratched at his scalp, wincing when the action pulled on his still injured left arm. Ever since the train wreck before the sports festival, I've been jumping back and forth between the timelines randomly. At first I thought it must have been a fluke, some figment of my imagination toying with me. Maybe an after effect of the time travel. Shota thought back to how the kid had acted in the wake of the incident. He had been dazed and out of it like he wasn't sure what was real. So when it happened a second time, it was disconcerting. When you woke up from a nap in my apartment, the masked hero realized. That's right. But since the mess at Hosu went down right after that, there wasn't any time to look into it. I started thinking of them like memory downloads of sorts. Like how every now and again I'd match up with my first run self and share all the memories of what's been going on in each isolated timeline. Wait, so there's another you running around in the future? I thought you came back here. Power Loader sat up straighter. So did I, Viridian shrugged. But I've got a very distinct set of memories of what it was like when I thought Project Hope failed. Of surviving after that. It seems like it tore me in two parts. Shoved part of me back here to the second run, and kept part of me in the first run. Injuries and scars reflect once the downloads, or overlaps as I call them now, occur. He pointed out a few new scars that apparently hadn't been there initially, though Shota would argue that the kid had far too many scars regardless, and he honestly couldn't tell which ones and which ones weren't initially there. So that's how you know Shigaraki made another portal. Vlad gave a sharp nod. But that doesn't mean he can come back here too. It's something we shouldn't discount, Viridian scowled. Hold on a moment. Nezu shot him a serious look. Why have you been overlapping? Viridian winced as he reached for the larger stack of notes next to Project Hope. I've been looking into that for the last few days, so that's what he'd been doing. And I've come to a startling conclusion. He passed the stack to the principal, who quickly flipped through them. The timeline's breaking apart. It was the first time Shota had heard anything close to fear in the marsupial's voice. The timeline is destabilizing. Wait! Hisashi shot an alarmed look between the principal and the hero. What does that mean? It means we're on a time crunch. Viridian's eyes darkened significantly. My presence in this timeline is causing an anomaly that's destabilizing reality itself. The longer I stay here, the more it'll break apart. The blurrier the lines between the first and second run will become. After enough time, it'll become irreversible and they'll merge. You mean that everything in the first run, all of the Nomu, will break out into our timeline? Powerloader spoke in a strangled voice. For a moment, Shota imagined what it would be like. Hundreds of those white Nomu, and the other ones just as horrifying, suddenly spilling out of the cracks in reality, rampaging in the streets. It would be an utter disaster. A bloodbath, the likes of which the world had never seen before. Perhaps even worse than the first run itself. Killing Shigaraki is now even more important. Viridian spoke up once more. We kill him, we can prevent the future and stop the timelines from merging. With no first run to merge with, the danger will be gone. No more Nomu, and no more Shigaraki. Shota's gaze narrowed, but there was something in that statement that bothered him, but he couldn't quite place what it was. Hawks seemed deeply bothered by that statement as well, a dark shadow of shock that bordered on betrayal flickering across his features before it settled into something more akin to irritation or anger. Shota was about to speak up when someone else cut him off. And how long do we have until this destabilization reaches the point of no return? Sugamine's voice had a low growl of anxiety to it. My best guess? 6 months. 6 months. They had 6 months to prevent the end of the world. The silence sat in the room that weighed upon them all almost as heavily as the words themselves. So, what now? All Might gave a heavy sigh. We've been looking for Shigaraki for months already. And you've been at it for what? A year? The summer training camp. Viridian's words made Shota flinch back in surprise. You can't be serious. We cannot hold a summer training camp for students with Nomu run around. Snape sounded more frightened than angry. His uncharacteristic outburst surprised a few people in the room, but Shota understood entirely. Having students in an isolated location, even with heroes, was asking for the League to attack them. And if these new Nomu came to hunt, there would be nothing they could do to protect them. Listen to me. Shota had never heard Viridian snap at anyone before. He was always laid back and calm, joking or competitive. Sometimes he was thoughtful or exuberant when he was excited about something. Perhaps a bit timid at times, but never had he seen him snap at someone. The sharpness of his tone silenced the room faster than anything Shota had ever seen. Viridian took a deep breath. Shigaraki will attack the training summer camp. They will kidnap a student. It has to be me. The League can bring me straight to Shigaraki, and I can take him out. That was the plan before the portals came into play, Suguchi shook his head firmly. There's no guarantee he'll attack now. What if he's already jumped back like you? Viridian rested his face in the palm of his hand for a moment. If Shigaraki's already jumped back, then everything will have been for nothing. He's got hundreds of quirks. He paused for a moment, but he hasn't. And how can you be so sure? The detective's voice was a little lighter, likely because he could hear the truth in Viridian's statement. Because I wasn't working alone in the first run. I was with a small group of revolutionaries. Renaissance. Whatever you want to call them. I know that Quip, Tamaki, and Dabi wouldn't let him through the portal, and neither will my other self. You forget that I'm there too. I'll do everything I can to keep him from jumping you there. Shota felt something in him relax a bit at that. If Viridian himself was there to keep Shigaraki from jumping back, then it was entirely possible that they'd only have to deal with the younger one, a much easier target. So the most he can do is set them some Nomu through a portal. Nezu's fur smoothed down that bit at that. It's not ideal, but so long as no people come here, we should be able to count the timelines remaining roughly the same. Then the camp is a go? 13 spoke up softly. Isn't it still too dangerous? These are kids, which is why we'll take precautions. Viridian's voice was much more relaxed now. It set Shota at ease. Hearing the vigilante turned hero so on edge had added a tension to the room that he hadn't even consciously noticed. Higakure, can you dig some bunkers under the summer campgrounds? Make sure there's multiple tunnels branching out to the areas so that they're separated, they can still escape. Nomu can't tunnel underground, so even if they show up, and the students and the staff will be safe. Why can't they tunnel? Shota found himself asking. For all the things these nightmares seem to be capable of, he never thought they'd be defeated by dirt. Nope. But in the first run, we didn't have a way to reliably dig or make bunkers, Viridian explained. Not without making too much noise. Besides, Nomu weren't the only thing we had to worry about at first. Other survivors, Tsukuuchi realized suddenly, with limited resources. Anyway, the tunnels will protect them from any Nomu attacks. The kids stopped the conversation before it could get derailed. Cementos and I can get some sturdy bunkers ready, and with plenty of time for the camp. Powerloader nodded firmly. Good. Sugamine, are we still on for that police training camp? If we can coordinate with the hero class, we'll have a better chance of avoiding injuries when the villains attack. The police chief gave a heavy sigh. Only if you actually plan to train my men. I'll take our best officers. Of course, Viridian smirked. You really think I'd hold a fake training camp? I'm wounded. Yes, you are. Which is why you need to rest, Hawks finally spoke up, with a teasing tone. But Shota was almost sure he caught something beneath that easy smile. Almost a warning tone. All right, then. Nezu clapped his paws. So the plan is thus. We'll continue as normal, with Viridian teaching the hero class students stealth-innovation thrice a week. Maybe more, depending on everyone's progress. He will train those of us here with everything they need to know when it comes to the first run Nomu. He waited for the kids to nod before speaking again. All the first-year Hero Course students will attend the summer training camp, which will be conjoined with the police training camp, run by Viridian. When the villains attack, we will do our best to make sure Morodoria is the one taken, while our staff guides the students underground. To make this easier, we'll have ectoplasm follow every student that leaves a hero's sight. Said teacher nodded. His cloning ability was ideal for this kind of mission. Does that mean the rest of us will be coming along for the camp too? 13 tilted their head curiously. Though, in Shota's humble opinion, the look in their eye quite plainly said that they had no intentions of sitting this one out. Of course, Nezu grinned. Though the students won't know that, so those who come along will have to stay hidden. With my lessons, that shouldn't be an issue. Viridian's grin made even Shota shudder lightly. The kid had been utterly terrifying when he'd been a vigilante. He was under no illusions that this training camp of Viridians would be a hell of itself. He'd seen the kid teach his class after all, and he was not looking forward to being a student again. Well, I think this about finishes this up, Nezu hummed thoughtfully. We've got 6 months to sort this out. I want everyone to be careful. I don't want any fatalities by the end of this mission. Not for my students, and certainly not for my staff. He paused for a moment to let that sink in. Meeting adjourned! Izuku sat on the couch of the staff dorms, leaning lightly against Kaigo. He'd known immediately that his brother would want to speak with him regarding what he'd said at the meeting, but neither had dared broach the topic. They both knew what was going to be said regardless. Is there nothing I can do that can change your mind? The winged hero's voice was terribly small and quiet, frail in a way Izuku hadn't heard since ever, really. Believe me, Kai-chan, if there was another way, I'd take it in a heartbeat. He let his head rest against his brother's shoulder. When everything's done, can you still... Kaigo shifted slightly to look at Izuku, likely trying to understand what he was getting at. The blonde had been frighteningly adept at reading the time traveler's expressions. Of course, Izuku, I'll always be your brother. You really think I'd let you walk off into trouble without me there to bail you out? Thank you. He felt some kind of relief wash over him. If the worst came to pass, as he was fearing, then at least he'd still have Kaigo by his side. Izuku's sensitive ears caught the sound of someone headed down the stairs. He flashed his brother a smile. Come on now, let's drop the heavy topics. Kaigo chuckled lightly as he caught sight of Yuka and Snipe coming down the stairs. All right. He held up his hands in surrender. You've got a training class with everyone this afternoon, right? Yeah, and you are included in that. Izuku shot him a look. Hey, I'm not cleared for combat. He gestured at his wrapped wings. Who said it was a combat class? Izuku shot him a wide smirk. You aren't getting out of this one. Besides, Nomu won't give two shits about a hurt wings. Yeah, I noticed. A small shiver traveled down the hero's spine. But we've got several hours before your lesson, so what are you going to do before then? Izuku noticed that Snipe and Yuka were watching the exchange curiously. My patrol, of course. He shot the three heroes a peace sign. Anyone want to come along? You're still hurt, Yuka replied with a worried expression. Should you really be patrolling like this? I'll be fine. He waved the concern away. It's just some scratches, really. You got stabbed, Snipe stated dryly. Like I said, scratches. The three of them shared an unamused look. Since we can't stop you, I'll come along, Yuka smiled as they pulled something out of their backpack. It looked like a nicely folded set of clothes. With the push of a button, they inflated to show 13's hero outfit. They slipped into it with the ease of practice, pulling their iconic helmet out from their backpack and clicking it into place. Who better to keep you from getting hurt than a rescue hero? Izuku barked out a soft laughter. If you can keep me from getting hurt constantly, Shota might just give his patrol slot to you. Go on then. If Aizawa catches you head to patrol, you know he'll give you an earful. Snipe rolled his eyes. Yamada Hazashi was a lot of things right now that he normally wasn't. He was tired having to take care of Shota's injuries in place of the hospital the man refused to return to. He was emotionally and mentally drained. Learning that the timeline itself was breaking apart certainly played no small part in that, he was sure. But most of all, Hazashi was scared. He'd seen Shota wake up from these nightmares more times than he could count, but these ones about the white Nomu were different. The way he'd wake up in a cold sweat with the fear of death in his eyes was distinctly foreign to the voice hero. So when his husband heard that Viridian was going to go out to patrol with 13, he'd been quick to try and voice his concerns and try and go along as well. Try being the key word there. Hazashi was quite stubborn when it came to the safety of the people he cared about, which was how he found himself joining the two on their patrol. Racer worries too much, Viridian shook his head as he led the two heroes down the street. Hazashi marveled how many people stopped to greet the green-clad hero. Considering the fact that Viridian was technically an underground hero, the fact that he was so recognizable was incredible. Not to mention the mass support the kid garnered. He'd started a massive worldwide movement to better the lives of those with weak quirks and those without him. He doubted that the kid even realized that he was a global icon. Even so, Sho really wasn't kidding when he said the vigilante could find trouble. They'd been on patrol for only 2 hours and they'd already run across 6 muggings. That considered, he thought he was entirely justified in his not-so-quiet groans when they heard the quiet beeping of their hero phones. Viridian pulled out his phone with an intrigued expression. Bank robbery. Looks like a block away from us? He sent off a quick message indicating that they were responding to the call. How does that even work? When the banker presses the silent alarm under the counter, it notifies the police and any nearby heroes, 13 explained. As the three of them took off at a run, they were the first ones on the scene. Hates hostage situations, Hazashi scowled, earning a nod from Viridian. Okay, I think I've got a plan. Viridian settled the two with a surprisingly heavy look. I'll infiltrate the building and get a good look at the situation. If I'm able, I'll distract the villains. 13, when I give you the signal, you'll get the hostages out of there. Mike, you'll be my backup. Once I've got the villains' attentions, you'll attack. I'll give you the signal. Hazashi muled the plan over. It was pretty good. Loose enough to rework if something unexpected came up, but cohesive enough to be called a plan in and of itself. Sounds good, Viridian. We'll be on standby waiting for your signal. He tapped his earpiece, waking it up. Viridian did the same as 13 nodded. He didn't like waiting, but it was a necessary part of their job. After a few tense minutes of quiet crowd control, trying to keep the public from interfering without tipping off the villains of their presence, their earpiece crackled to life. I've got eyes on the villains. 3 of them. They're armed. 2 of them have visible quirks. One is some kind of tabby cat mutation, while the other has bony spike-like protrusions on his arms. The 3rd person doesn't have a visible quirk. Might be something mental, Viridian hummed softly. 16 people are in the bank, 5 employees, 11 customers. All 3 are villains who have weapons, but only a 3rd one has the gun. The other 2 are armed with knives. Good work, 13 nodded, though Viridian couldn't see them. Any injuries? None from what I can see, but there's something off about the situation. Hisashi could hear the frown. Stay on standby. I'm going to make contact. Hisashi shifted from his position by the window, ready to leap in and assist as needed. If things went wrong, it'd be up to him and 13 to make sure everyone made it out okay. He watched, somewhat transfixed, as Viridian walked out of one of the hallways of the bank. If he just happened upon the situation. He risked the crackling the window open so he could better hear the situation. Freeze! A voice called from somewhere beyond Hisashi's view. On the ground. Drop any... Wait a minute. Don't I know you? Holy crap, dude, that's Viridian! A female voice stated excitedly. Hisashi could barely make out a thin cat's tail flicking in excitement. Oh my god, you're really him! Hisashi couldn't help but share a bewildered look with 13. Sure, heroes often get recognized, but there weren't many villains that had such blatant idolization for the hero that came to capture them. Shit, man, why'd it have to be you? A 3rd voice, male, stated. Anyone else would have been fine. He sounded distinctly disappointed. No? Are you disappointed? I promise I'm not that bad of a fighter. Viridian's smirk was audible. It's not that, the 3rd voice sighed. It's just... Damn it. Of all people. He made a sound of frustration. I can't do this. I won't fight you, Viridian. Hisashi felt his eyebrows raise as the female voice spoke up. I don't think any of us can, she admitted. We'll go quietly, but only because it's you. Not that I'm not appreciative of this, but why? Even Viridian sounded confused. Because you're quirkless, the 3rd voice spoke up, and so am I. Hisashi felt his breath leave him. Viridian's entrance stance shifted. Mind if I ask why you decided to rob a bank? Do you even have to ask? The quirkless man gave a dry laugh. You know how it is for people like us. My wife is ill. She has a really weak quirk. I can't hold a job to raise the money because nobody will hire my quirkless ass. The man's voice tightened. But if I had the money... No, even if I'm just imprisoned, the nation will give her the benefits to get by. It's the only way to pay for the surgery that'll save her life. I'll go quietly, I promise. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. Hisashi felt like he wanted to cry. What the fuck? Was their world really that messed up that someone had to become a villain just to save their wives' lives? And the worst part of it was that Viridian didn't even sound surprised. The payout would have been better if the hero who captured us got hurt, the girl explained. But we've all got a lot of respect for you, Viridian. None of us want to hurt you. I wish I could say I didn't understand, but I do, Viridian sighed. But you two, why are you doing this? I'm already a villain in the system, and so is Himaru here, the cat girl explained, likely gesturing to the boy with the spikes. Because we robbed a few places when I was younger, the streets aren't kind, even to a cat. She gave a small, humorless laugh. But the system isn't exactly nice to villains, even if we're reformed. You know they jack up the prices for stuff? That includes medical costs. Chichan here won't live another month, the other boy spoke off softly. The worst part is that her illness is treatable. They just made it so she couldn't afford it. If I'm dying, I might as well go out with a bang, she huffed. And helping save a life? Well, I've done enough bad in my life. Maybe something good will help me on the other side. She gave a shrug. Hisashi bit his lip hard. This was wrong on so many levels. This was... Sounds about right. Viridian's voice cut through his thoughts like a gunshot. Believe me, I know how bad the system is to people. Unfortunately, I still have to arrest you three. He sighed. But if there's anyone you want me to watch over for you until you're released, let me know." "Released?" The quirkless kid scoffed. "You think she and I will ever see daylight again? They'll kill me in the system, you know that, and she'll die." "Not if I've got anything to say about it." Viridian's voice was firm. I'm a hero." Hisashi was quite sure it was the first time he'd admitted it out loud. "And heroes protect people, and that includes you. You may be villains, but you're still people. I'll protect you." It was his slogan. Hisashi was sure. At least, that's what people had started to say. But he had never heard the kid say it before. Suddenly he understood why people thought it was Viridian's version of All Might's "I am here." Though the words weren't directed at him, they carried a surety that resonated within his very soul. A feeling of warmth and safety that wrapped around him and told him that everything would be all right. And here he was saying it to the very people they'd been called in to arrest. Hisashi felt something in him shift and calcify, a determination to change this world, change it for the better. He'd personally look into the quirkless man's wife and pay for her bills, and he would also make sure the little cat girl got her treatment as well, fully paid for. If he pulled a few strings, he could get all their sentences lightened for a few months. Flashing lights caught his attention as the police pulled up. Viridian guided the 3 would-be robbers out of the bank, and the 2 hiding heroes stood up. He had to hold back a smirk when he saw the expression on the lead's cop face the moment he saw Viridian. "Why do the weird things always happen around you?" the monkey-corked cops asked with a sigh. Hisashi was half sure that he was one of Tsukuyochi's men. "Not my fault the universe loves to throw me a curveball," he snickered. "Do me a favor and keep an eye on these 3. I don't want anyone mistreating them." There was a sharpness to the once vigilante's gaze that quickly reflected in the cop's eye as well. "Of course. I'll personally watch over them." "Perfect." Viridian turned over to the would-be villains. "Don't cause them any trouble, okay? I'll come back by and check on you 3 later, so please stay on best behavior." He winked, earning light smiles from the 3. Hisashi shook his head. What a day. Hopefully the kid would be willing to cut patrol short. Something told him that was nothing more than wishful thinkings. There were a lot of things Viridian was prepared to handle. This was decidedly not one of them. Stopping a bank robbery without violence was a great way to start off a shift, though the reasoning for the mobbers' motives were decidedly not great, and he'd make damn sure that nobody hurt them using the system, but still, he'd take what he could get, especially if it involved not having another knife in his gut. He'd had a small laugh when the 2 heroes following him around realized they were headed into the south side, but the trouble they'd come across was a bit more than Viridian felt he could handle. Not because it was that dangerous, but because of who it involved. It'd been a fight of some kind, but the second party had fled the moment the heroes had shown up, leaving Izuku to stare at the familiar, if much younger, face. Bright blue eyes, framed by horridly scarred skin, held together with staples. Freshly dyed black hair. There was no mistaking this kid. Was he a kid at this point? That stared coolly at him across the street. "Heroes in the south side?" Dabi scoffed. "Never thought I'd see the day." Viridian belt back his knee-jerk response to the familiar voice. "Hey now, I like to think I'm a bit of an oddity when compared to the norm." He kept his voice even and light. "That's true." Dabi gave a small laugh. "Viridian, right? You're that quirkless hero everyone's been talking about. I'll be honest, I respect you. A lot of villains do. You took what society thought of you and flipped them the bird. That takes guts, and I can respect that." He felt himself grin beneath his mask. Dabi's words echoed in his mind. "Don't let me die nameless." It was a promise he intended to keep. He felt 13 and present Mike's shift uncertainly behind him. He needed to figure out a way to get Dabi on their side. "You don't strike me as the type of person to turn to a villainy out of boredom." He leaned casually against the brick wall of an alleyway. "I'm afraid if you want my life story, you'll have to find another source." Dabi's gaze narrowed and he turned to leave. "Shigaraki Tomura." The name made Dabi stiffen, foot halted halfway from the pavement. "I know you've been thinking of joining him. Don't. His ideals aren't what you think." "Oh?" Intrigued and guarded cyan eyes locked with the shadowed emerald. I'm going to warn you. Shigaraki is my end goal. If you join hands with him, I'll be forced to go after you as well. And I really don't want to do that. He paused for a moment to let that information sink in. Dabi. He held out a hand towards the villain. The system is shit. We both know that. You want to help me stick it to the heroes that their system is wrong? Let me help you. I'm working from the inside to change things. You don't have to sacrifice your future for revenge. The blue-eyed flame hero shot him a dark look. Evidently, that might have been the wrong thing to say. The hell do you know? His hands flexed in a way that Izuku knew from his Dabi he was prepared to summon his flames. Look, he cut himself off as a wave of wrongness came over him. Something wasn't right, something was. Then he heard it. A low growl from the street behind them. Instinct took hold as he drew his blade and spun around, something falling from his lips to warn his comrades of the danger that was among them, because he knew that growl, low and rumbling with the occasional cough-like chuff. Sure enough, he saw it on the other side of the street, lurking, watching. A royal Nomu. Hey, is that... Hisashi's voice was quiet enough that he had to give him props with his quirk and all. But if this had been a white Nomu, it would have gotten him killed. He'd need to go over that during their classes for sure. What the hell is that? Dabi's voice wasn't nearly so quiet, and the Nomu's gaze flitted towards the flame user. A Nomu. A royal Nomu. This one's a drone, but the queen should be nearby. Watch out. These ones hunt in packs. Viridian let his gaze flicker around the street, lingering in dark alleyways and on the rooftops just in case this one wasn't making a move because it was waiting for backup. Damn. He felt a shaky grin spread across his face. I hate Royal Nomu. Nomu? Dabi sounded shaken. Shigaraki's handiwork. Viridian shot him a look. You still want to join hands with the freak show that made these fuckers? Show's gonna kill me. Hisashi bemoaned silently. I promised to keep you out of trouble. Even a racer knows that's a hopeless request. Viridian chuckled softly. 13. Will your quirk work on organic matter? Yes, but it'll tire me out faster. They stepped forward, but Izuku could see them trembling lightly. He reminded himself that this was Yuka and Hisashi's first time seeing a first-run Nomu. Without warning, the beast charged them. 13 opened the cap on their finger. Black hole, they shouted, and the Nomu, sensing the impending danger, was quick to try and turn away, but it was too late. With a horrible screech, in it went. It was almost laughably easy compared to every Nomu fight that the time traveler had ever had, but he wasn't dumb enough to think this was over. On an instinct born of years of apocalyptic danger, he brought up a blade to block the angry claw a second before it would have taken 13's head off. Oh, lovely. The rest of them have arrived. Is this normal for you? Dabi shot him an incredulous look. You'll get used to my special brand of chaos after a while, he promised with a grin leaping out of the way of the tail that tried to slice into his side. Though, I have to say, this may be a tad more chaos than I can handle. Viridian rolled to the side, swiping up his blade, deflecting another tail that tried to hit him. Damn royals. How do we fight these? Hisashi eyed the scene warily. He saw Hisashi smile brightly in relief even as the royal Nomu closed in on him. Thank you, little listener. His momentary lapse in concentration was rewarded to a biting pain in his arm where one of the whip-like tails caught him. He cursed softly. You go for the brains. These are long-range fighters. Their tails are bladed, so try and stay out of their strike zone. Right. Go for the brain. Hisashi pulled out a pole. Cloud Eraser made me learn how to use this. No. Protect 13. Viridian's voice was sharp. He eyed the four Nomu warily, and the four Nomu eyed him. Zashi and Yuka wouldn't be much help here. The rescue hero was already out of energy from consuming an entire Nomu with their quirk. I can fight, Yuka panted, but Izuku shook his head. Conserve that energy for the queen. These are just the drones. One of the Nomu made a dash at him again, when it lit up like a Christmas light, all in flames of blue. I know you said to go for the brain, but this works too, right? The villain sent him a wary look. Izuku grinned brightly beneath his mask. I mean, damn near anything dies if you burn it enough, he nodded. But be careful, I don't want you hurting yourself. The scarred youth scoffed. That's something I haven't heard spoken to me in a long time. Before anything else could be said, Izuku leapt forward, trying to close the distance between the Nomu and himself in hopes of avoiding that tail. He pushed off the ground, dodging to the side to avoid one tail strike, only to inadvertently leap into the path of another. He bit back a cry as it bit into his left ankle, drawing a steady stream of blood. That'd slow him down for sure, but he didn't think there was any permanent damage done. He'd find out later when the adrenaline wore off. A cry from his left drew his attention for a moment. Hisashi barely blocked a strike from one of the Nomu. 13 was doing their best to assist them with their exhausted energy reserves. Izuku cursed when one of the tails speared itself into his side. "Fuck you too," he cursed at it through clenched teeth. "Jeez, I leave you alone for a handful of days and you're already a shakbab," a familiar voice spoke up, as the Nomu by Hisashi went up in a tower of carefully controlled blue flames, far more controlled than the kid behind him was capable of. A grin spread across his face. "Took you long enough, Scarface." "Oh, please." He felt the presence leap down from the window of the building beside him. "You weren't expecting me and you know it." He glanced up to meet the familiar cyan blue of his brother, Dabi, first-run Dabi, which was admittedly strange considering that his younger self was standing not 10 feet away, staring at them like he just announced that All Might was streaking through Tokyo, seeing tiptoe through the tulips. We'll talk more about how later. Maneuver 12? Izuku felt much more at ease having his brother by his side. Suddenly, the Royal Nomu situation didn't seem quite that bad. "I'm feeling more of a Nate today," Dabi smirked. The familiarity of it all had a grin spreading across his face. "Keep it up if you can, squirt." "Hey!" Viridian bristled as his fellow first-runner dashed forth, blue flames flickering on his hand. "I'll have you know that I've grown 3 inches this year, and you've shrunk at least 1.5 feet. Dabi laughed as Izuku rolled under one of the Nomu and scaled its back and jabbed his blade into its brain, trusting Dabi to keep the dangerous tails away from him. A sharp whistle from his companion had him leaping off the Nomu without hesitation, dodging the kill strike that would have undoubtedly taken him out. "So the sleeping beauty over there. Maybe I'd fix those eyebrows." "I'll have you know that these eyebrows of mine are Gucci," he cackled manically. Quip would agree. "Fire in the hole!" he shouted, and Izuku quickly leapt backwards to avoid the literal pillar of flesh-melting flames. "Watch it, Sippo, not everyone wants to look like you." Izuku shot him a look that flat out as they circled the last Nomu. "Did you already take out the queen?" "Who do you take me for?" the fire user scoffed. "Why do you think I was late for the party?" "I don't know. Got lost." Again. "One time!" Dabi shook his head. Izuku eyed the wariness in the Nomu before them. "Yo, give me a lift. This one's about to make a run for it." "Guess we can't let it get away." Dabi made a big show of sighing before getting into position. "Just don't miss." He threw Izuku into the air. He spun using his momentum to aim from above while Dabi distracted the Nomu on the ground. From this angle, he had a perfect shot for the brain, and he took it. He landed with a graceful stumble before leaning into the brick wall, bumping his fist to Dabi's to celebrate their victory. "I think that deserves a drink." "I mean, aren't you too young right now?" Dabi snickered. "I can still put this sword through your foot," the vigilante turned hero warned. Dabi laughed. "All right, you win, Mr. Hero." Izuku felt his cheeks redden. "Time damn it, can I trade you in for Quip?" "Nope, too late. You're stuck with me." Dabi grinned. I'm very confused," younger Dabi stated, staring between the two and the dead Nomu. "Very confused." Dabi, Izuku's Dabi, that is, sighed. "Give us a minute, Shrimp. I'll be right back." He took his younger self by the shoulders and guided him down a nearby alley. Izuku decided he should check up with his group as well. "You guys alive?" He clutched his side with a good hand. It was bleeding quite nicely, having been torn wider by his movements, but it wasn't anything life-threatening, especially when they had medicine this time. "Listener? What was that?" Hisashi trembled from head to toe, and he couldn't blame him in the slightest. "Dabi. My Dabi from the first run," he nodded. "I'll have to ask him the specifics later, but my best guess is my other self realized what was going on and sent us back up." He shrugged. That was decidedly nice not to be the only first runner. There was a sort of weight that lifted from his shoulders. He wasn't alone before, but he'd been alone in his pain and panic, and now he had someone who understood. He pulled out his phone.
Viridian Chaos. So, coffee addict. God damn it, problem child. What did you break this time? Viridian Chaos. Why did you assume I broke something? Huggable Marshmallow. We found some trouble on patrol. Dividing by 0. Are you okay? Scream. Everyone's alive. Listeners hurt. As in, he got stabbed again. 13's exhausted, and we've got about 5 dead Nomu in the south side. Viridian Chaos. I'm fine. It's a flesh wound. Mother Hen. I swear to everything you hold dear, please get that looked at. Viridian Chaos is typing. Mother Hen. By recovery, girl. Viridian Chaos. ...
He glanced at Hisashi and Yuka, who were both giving him a no-nonsense look. He sighed.
Viridian Chaos. Fine, Mother Hen. Thank you, Rat God. So, there were more of them? Coffee addict. Please come back so I can know you're all safe. Viridian Chaos. I'll be bringing a friend. Or 2, depending on Junior's answer. Stop the paperwork. Junior? Viridian Chaos. Sakuchi! You finally figured out how to change your username. I'm so proud. Sniffing face. Stop the paperwork. Please don't. Viridian Chaos. One of my buddies from the first run came to give us a hand. He's technically a villain, but he's my brother, so please don't attack him. Even if he is ugly.
I am not ugly, Dabi scowled as he rested his chin on Viridian's head, reading the messages. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but if you look in a mirror and it breaks, that's not because of beauty, Izuku snickered, and he ducked under Dabi's warning slot. Well, Junior, as you've called him, is going to be joining us. Dabi pointed over his shoulder at his younger self. By the way, you can't go by Dabi, because I'm Dabi, and I'm older, so you go to stuck with our birth name. Younger Dabi stiffened. You know why I don't go by that, he growled. Yeah, and I wished I'd changed things when I was your age, Dabi scowled. Trust me, if anyone can break reality, it's Izuku, and if that reality is just your reality, then he'll do it in a heartbeat. You say that like it's something for you to be proud of, Izuku snickered. Also, way to name drop me. It's not like you weren't going to tell him anyways, Dabi shrugged. Come on, Spitfire, we're going to UA. Do, we have a say in this? Hisashi tilted his head. Because I'd like to have the listener go to a hospital first. Dabi snorted in amusement. If you can drag Izuku to a hospital without knocking him out first, then by all means, go ahead. He waited for a moment before Hisashi sighed. Didn't think so. Izuku leaned lightly against Dabi as they walked. Good to have you back, bro. Dabi's gaze softened as he rubbed the top of Izuku's head, hair covered by his hero outfit. Good to be back. And that was chapter 23, A Blast from the Past of Viridian by Silver Mist Anime Lover. And this was the final chapter, so next time I post, it will not be any more of Viridian. Thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to see you guys next time. Have a wonderful day.